All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We've got a genuinely bizarre question to kick things off. Why on earth is the White House comparing major Indian manufacturing hubs to the American Midwest? I mean, it sounds like a massive geographical mix-up, right? But it's actually the whole foundation of a bombshell new trade report from the U.S. administration called the Great Transshipment Scam. So today, we're going to look closely at how global supply chains are allegedly getting completely rewired and exactly how India landed smack in the middle of this wild new chapter in international trade. We'll map out this whole international mystery across 6 quick areas. We're looking at the ugly sister cities, the shadow transshipment network, the battle over pumps and compressors, what it means to be a Tier 1 nation, the tricky transformation rule, and finally, we'll meet the border detective. So let's start with Section 1, the ugly sister cities. We've got to unpack the core mystery of this report first. When you look at the global manufacturing map, pairing up a bustling Indian industrial hub like Pune with a historic American center like Cincinnati is, well, totally unexpected. It immediately makes you scratch your head, right? But the White House uses this exact comparison to highlight a massive structural shift happening in global trade right now. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the central conflict. The report explicitly pairs the Pune, Gujarat, and Chennai production belt in India right up against the Cincinnati, Dayton, and Columbus manufacturing corridor in Ohio. It literally calls these pairings ugly sister cities. Now, to be clear, this has absolutely nothing to do with cultural exchanges or those friendly civic sister cities you're used to. The word ugly is used because these pairs are fiercely competitive, not cooperative. The report argues that these foreign hubs are directly competing with American regions making the exact same products, putting immense pressure on U.S. manufacturers. Which brings us to Section 2, the shadow transshipment network. To really understand why these specific regions are suddenly locked in direct competition, we have to look at the underlying mechanics here. The crux of the issue revolves around a concept called tariff arbitrage. You see, since 2018, the U.S. has slapped steep tariffs on goods coming directly out of China. So, to bypass those heavy costs, the report alleges that some Chinese goods are quietly routed through a third country. They undergo maybe some minor processing, or honestly, just a quick paperwork change, and then boom, they're exported to the U.S. under that new country's much lower tariff rate. The White House refers to the network of countries facilitating this as the Shadow Transshipment Network. And the sheer scale of this is mind-blowing. Think about $67 billion. A U.S. Commerce Department analysis cited in the report estimates that roughly $67 billion of U.S.-bound goods were transshipped from China through just 3 countries, Mexico, India, and Vietnam, in the year 2025 alone. That is a staggering volume of trade, potentially shifting routes just to dodge customs duties. And the result? An estimated $28 billion in lost U.S. tariff revenue. But look, this isn't just a headache for government accountants. It hits local economies hard. To put a human face on these numbers, the administration's model estimates this specific scenario could be associated with up to 450,000 displaced U.S. jobs. They use a benchmark calculation that assumes for every $1 billion in diverted imports, roughly 6,000 American jobs are directly or indirectly displaced. Let's dig into the exact products involved in Section 3, pumps, compressors, and competition. So what exactly is tying India and Ohio together in this dispute? Well, when the report pits the Pune, Gujarat, Chennai belt against Ohio, it gets hyper-specific. We're talking about goods classified under HS codes 8413 and 8414. For the rest of us, that translates to pumps and compressors. The administration argues that Indian hubs are absorbing Chinese-linked flows of these highly specific industrial products, and they're doing it to the direct detriment of Ohio's industrial supply chains that manufacture the exact same stuff. The language in the White House report is totally uncompromising here. It claims that, quote, each pairing displays the same zero-sum arithmetic. Basically, they're arguing that if a Chinese-made pump gets routed through India and enters the U.S. stamped with an Indian identity, it's not magically creating new market demand. Instead, American producers of that exact pump face lost orders, their factories see lower utilization, and employment takes a hit. In their eyes, it is strictly a one-to-one loss for the U.S.
All right, Section 4, decoding Tier 1 status.
So where does India actually fit into this global shadow network, according to the U.S.? Well, India is placed squarely in Tier 1. The report calls these nations diversified scale leaders. So India is sitting on a list right alongside massive economies like Canada, the EU, Mexico, and Japan. What lands India on the specific radar is its sheer manufacturing scale combined with its deep, pre-existing links to Chinese supply chains. But here is a really crucial nuance that you absolutely have to take away from this explainer. We've got to impartially note that the report doesn't actually name a single specific Indian company with a confirmed customs violation. It doesn't point to one illegal shipment sitting in Pune, Gujarat, or Chennai. Instead, it explicitly admits that for Tier 1 countries, the transshipment risk is, quote, embedded within broad legitimate trade flows. Basically, the U.S. knows companies are genuinely relocating to India, but they're terrified that illegal routing is hitching a ride, hiding within that massive boom of totally legitimate trade. Which takes us right into Section 5, the transformation rule. This brings up a massive, highly consequential gray area in international trade law. It's basically the million-dollar question for Indian exporters today. If an Indian factory imports a Chinese motor, sticks it into a pump, and exports it, how does U.S. Customs classify the final product? Is it Indian, or is it still Chinese? Well, the answer isn't automatic. U.S. origin rules lean heavily on a concept called substantial transformation to figure out what a product truly is. It's kind of a three-step dance. First, you import the components. Second, you process them. And third, you declare the origin. But step 2 is where the whole battle is fought. Did the product undergo just some minor tweaking, or was it substantially transformed? A simple Made in India sticker doesn't pass the test. What definitely doesn't count is just warehousing a product, slapping a new label on it, repackaging it, or doing really minor assembly. What does count is a fundamental change in the product's form, appearance, nature, or character. So if an Indian manufacturer is doing complex assembly, like fundamentally building that pump from the ground up, it's an Indian product. But if they're just tightening a few bolts on a mostly finished Chinese pump, the U.S. is going to view it as a Chinese product trying to cheat the tariff system. Moving on to our final stop, Section 6, Meet the Border Detective. With literally billions of dollars on the line, how is the U.S. actually planning to catch these tariff evaders? Well, the White House report outlines this emerging artificial intelligence system, and it's literally called Detective Border. The goal of this AI is to dramatically beef up how U.S. Customs and Border Protection flags suspicious shipments and verifies these country of origin claims. This is a real game changer because it's not just about a customs agent looking at a piece of paper anymore. This AI will dig deep. It analyzes shipping routes, company ownership structures, and expected trade patterns. But maybe the craziest part, it looks at physical manufacturing capacity. Think about it. If a company in Chennai claims to have built 10,000 heavy-duty compressors from scratch, Detective Border will analyze if that specific factory actually has the physical footprint and the machinery required to crank out that kind of volume. If the data doesn't match the story, that shipment gets flagged immediately. So as the U.S. ramps up enforcement with AI and aggressive new policies, it all boils down to this ultimate question for India's ambitious manufacturing sector. Is India becoming a genuine manufacturing alternative, or just a new backdoor route into the U.S. market? Washington is effectively putting India on notice. They want proof that this shift away from China represents genuine ground-up manufacturing in places like Pune and Gujarat, not just a shadow network trying to slip through the cracks. How India navigates this ugly sister city label is absolutely going to shape the future of global trade. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning what's behind the label.